If you can see one of those figures of the idiot in some of the silent chaplain, and I think maybe only the silent chaplain, I'd have to think, kind of the idiot thrown into the trappings of and thrown into civilization, and to take, and I guess in reverse as well, like if like Zizek was saying, using himself as an example, the presumably civilized person who finds themselves in the position of the idiot. Do you think there's a way of using that comedy, and I think this also goes with proving Wolfgang right in that philosophy is best found in comedy in America, and really comedy, not the idiot as a joke or anything, to help break those projections of the idiot as somehow on the side of God and thus us on the side of just human, to help us come to terms with the universal stupidity.
No, that's a very rich question and would require opening all sorts of dossiers, certainly on the violence of Chaplin's so-called comic or comedic and comical interventions and the destitution. I mean, there we do, and we haven't yet, and maybe this is or is not the place to do so, considered the political propellers and motors behind some of these figurations that I really did a drive-by here, but Wordsworth hangs on to the idiot in order to score political points and to show his rage at injustice. One could put scandalously, as you've just done, and read bifocally Chaplin with Wordsworth, and Chaplin's also the way Chaplin was thrown out of the United States and so on and so forth. So I do think that would be a great startup engine for thinking through certain kinds of things, including the violence of comedy. And I was thinking of a German, of course, writer, Jean-Paul, whom I mentioned here, who's written magnificently about humor, comedy, and the violence of the incursion of in his case, of the stupid idiots, that he declares war on. So this is why I tried to switch on the Nietzschean transvaluation machine, because there's good and bad stupidity, there's good and bad idiocy, there's good and bad transcendence or quasi-transcendence and so on. So one wants to slalom and also to see them bleed into each other and not just be kept in their separation. There's ways that Nietzsche says without certain types of idiocy, things wouldn't get done in a way. And certainly Dostoevsky is absolutely fascinated by idiocy. I didn't get to go into the medicalized chapters, of course, because idiocy was also a way of naming epilepsy and other kinds of convulsive illnesses over which the body had no control, and yet the body started writing and splurting, and Wordsworth has a lot to say about, for him, the idiots have these matted bodies, they're dirty, they're also, well, one would have to read the body, which is his way also of showing language, the way language inscribes us. So the stammering and stuttering with which idiocy begins to show up in poetry is also the essence of the poetic word, and where poetry returns to its own astonishment and stammering and bewilderment.
So your next book will be The Birth of Poetry Out of the Spirit of Idiocy.
That's right there.
Last year did with Jacques Roubaud. No?
Yes.
You would think for the first glance, what an idiot. You know? There's no real sentence, there's just louds. And then he was that poet, you couldn't have a better one.
No, Judith always brings the
Yes,
best.
was-
No, really, and he was certainly someone who I think invaded us in a very serious way. Yeah.
Henri?
Yes, I wanted to refer to Rancière and the ignorant master. I'm wondering if you think that a philosopher should introduce himself as knowing nothing and expecting from himself.
The others should, yes, the other philosophers. No, but go ahead. I try to consider, did I interrupt you, by the way? Would you want to go
I
on?
was just referring to De Souza in 1815, who also was referring to ignorant master, and to Lacan, who is the supposé savoir,
Sujet, oui.
le sujet supposé savoir.
No, absolutely. This is, there's so much that has been said and should be said. But what I try to, my pervertible relation to this question was circuited through Levinas and the effort to think a possible ethics, or what happens to ethics when you're faced with the debilitated subject, or faced with something that it's neither a pathology nor a moral default. This is what's amazing about the idiot. The idiot cannot be subjected to moral reprimand or legal lockdown in any way. But nonetheless, what happens to ethics or in ethics when it is made to confront the debilitated or exhausted or fucked up or drugged out or stupid, stupefied so-called subject? So this is one of my questions, the vegged out, and it doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be a Warholian or a Dennis Cooper-like, you know, death drive in full gear. It just has to be even, it doesn't even have to be a full-fledged idiot, but what do you do with ethics and the dumbed down or mentally deficient, which of course everyone is, and so on and so forth. So I tried to consider the ethical stance to be a certain kind of modification of what you were suggesting, Henri, which is I am stupid before the other as an ethical stance, that I bow before the other in my idiocy or stupidity in a certain way. So that may be a modulation of what you were suggesting. I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but you're right. Nearly everyone worth his or her salt points out how barré and fucked up the master is, you know.